Hello, welcome back to the NOTCAST. It's number 307 today. It is the Tuesday, the 1st of August, 2023, and I'm talking about an album that's very nearly 10 years old. It is Nine Inch Nails' 8th studio album, Hesitation Marks, released on the 3rd of September 2013, which means it's almost 10 years. Good God. It feels like much less than that, actually. I found as I get older, time feels that it moves quicker and faster. I mean, certainly I think about, what I was doing in, let's say, the summer of 2014, and that feels like recent history to me. But that's 9 years ago now, and it really doesn't feel like 9 years at all. So this is the most recent Nine Inch Nails full studio album, although there have been 3 EPs that have been released after that, not the actual events, Ad Violence and Bad Witch, which kind of combined to basically an album and a half's worth of material, which came out in 2016, 17, and 18. And there's been numerous soundtrack albums that have been released since then as well. Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. Atticus, having joined Nine Inch Nails in 2015 or thereabouts, have effectively populated a soundtrack wing of moody ambient, which is their most prolific form of output. And I'll touch upon a couple of those soundtrack albums during the course of today as well. So on the last time that I talked about this, which was 3 staggering months ago at the start of the summer, we're now really deep into the summer. I talked about The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The Social Network, How to Destroy Angels, and Sound City. Today we're going to go for Hesitation Marks. So it was announced on the 28th of May 2013 that this album was coming out, and there'd been an announcement around some live dates as well from Nine Inch Nails. Nobody quite knew exactly who was going to be in the band, but they were going to play live. But what was pretty clear is that Nine Inch Nails was coming back, baby. We'd had the track Zoo Station for the Actung Baby tribute album in 2011. The idea was, I think, that when Trent split Nine Inch Nails or put Nine Inch Nails kind of on ice, I suppose is probably the polite way of putting it, in 2009, he'd been in that band for 20 years. That had been the main and in fact sole part of his release strategy. So he'd only ever known one artistic identity. He'd released 7 studio albums. He'd toured the world 7 times or 6 times at least. He'd released a lot of material, and I guess there comes a time when you kind of feel firstly knackered, and secondly you kind of feel maybe you've explored all of the possibilities and the permutations of a particular band's output and identity. Of course, having complete artistic control and identity, you can become anything that you want. I guess if what you really want to do is to put yourself inside a set of parameters and limitations, that can become kind of stifling. On the other hand, you can be like Damon Albarn, and you can jump from The Good, the Bad and the Queen and Gorillaz to Blur to Damon Albarn solo to Mali Music to Rocket Juice and the Moon or whatever it's called. And you can do it very easily, and people kind of going, who the fuck are you, man? What is your thing? Whereas with Nine Inch Nails, very, very clearly defined exactly what the band's identity, output, and visual language and sonic output and language was going to be. And so for Hesitation Marks, this is the time when I had to change my relationship to Nine Inch Nails. Certainly from the period where we had Pretty Hate Machine going through to The Slip, which was 20 years, a very long period of time. Nine Inch Nails was one of my very, very favourite bands. You know, Nin at Goldwyn's in September 1991 was and still is in my top 5 shows of all time. And for a long time, at least 7 or 8 years, it was number 1. And then I saw Nine Inch Nails again at Brixton twice in 1999, at Brixton in 2005, and the last time that I saw them, and the last time to date that I saw them, was at the London O2 Arena in July 2009. And I very definitely had a sense of, every time I saw them, there was a law of diminishing returns. It wasn't that Nine Inch Nails were bad, they weren't. It wasn't that the shows were bad, they absolutely weren't. But what I was finding is Nine Inch Nails were unchanging in the world, and I was changing. So my relationship to the band was changing, whether I liked it or not. And sometimes when you're invested in a band and a band says that it's going to split, I have a kind of a thing where if somebody splits up, or especially from a romantic basis, if I'm in a relationship and that relationship comes to an end, I very, very rarely would consider going back. Actually, I've done it twice, 3 times maybe. I've split up with somebody and they've changed their mind and they've decided that they want us to get back together, and I've been okay about that. But not for a very, very long time. And I could probably say that were my life different, there's 2 people, maybe 3 people. I don't want to tell you how many people I've been in relationships with, but not a big percentage of people that I would consider kind of going back to and having that same relationship or trying again and picking it up now. And so when Nine Inch Nails effectively were retired by Trent, my view was very clearly that was the end of that. And so when a band splits up and then it comes back, these days my relationship is going to be different to the band. There is an element of the band that cried wolf, because, oh, you told me you were over, and we went to the last show and we went crying and we did all of that, and oh, you're back now. But there's also an element of going, well, we've changed in the time whilst you've been away. You can't just knock on the door, come back in and go, hey, it's me, I'm back, and expect everyone to go, oh, Nine Inch Nails, oh, dude, come on, let's cry it out. It's like some people are going, I've had 4 or 5 years where you haven't existed and I've changed. And that's exactly where I was with the band. And there are some bands that when they reform and they come back, and I'm just like, no, I've done that. That's not me. Like, for example, Orbital have split up and reformed a number of times. Pulp have done the same. They've just finished their 2023 series of shows, which I haven't seen any of those, even though I saw a couple of the 2011 ones, and quite a lot during the band's original lifetime. And I mean, I dare say if there was another band that I really wanted to reform that had come back, I might not be interested, primarily because I'm like, that time of my life and that relationship with that band has come to its end. So that's where we were, and that's where I was with Hesitation Marks. So it's the first album where I had demoted the band from being a band that I loved to a band that I liked and was interested in. And there's no doubt about it, I love the records. I think there is not a bad Nine Inch Nails album in the pack. But the band as a whole, it felt to me that they have become kind of like a industrial version of James Brown or AC/DC. And this, by the way, is not a criticism. Having a band that's reliable, dependable, you know exactly what you're going to get when you put the needle down on the groove. I mean, that's admirable in many, many ways. But there is also a point of going, well, I've heard all of the possible permutations of this particular, emotional dialogue before, and you end up going, it's just repeating yourself. And that's where I think Hesitation Marks is. So it's got some really interesting ideas in it, but I do not love it. I did not connect with it, primarily because, and as I said in a previous episode about Nine Inch Nails, is if all of the songs are about a person's relationship to their reality, like most band songs are about a relationship to reality, but all of the songs are kind of circling the same set of emotional factors, kind of like going, well, I'm unhappy about certain things, or I can't find the relationship that I need to have, or my relationship to the reality that I live in. All of the songs on Hesitation Marks, and I should bring out the CD version here as well. All of the songs on Hesitation Marks felt like repetition of an idea that had previously been addressed and perfected in previous Nine Inch Nails records. There's some brilliant ideas in here, but the problem is they're not original ideas. They're rehashes of the original things, or rehashes of different ideas. It feels like Trent is trying to solve the same problems that he'd solved previously and addressed previously. There was nothing new in here. And as Trent himself said in an interview with New York Times, he said, I'm still that guy. I know that guy and I feel for him and I don't miss him. How do I feel about now that I'm on the other side? What is it to survive? What is it to have the markers of success and still feel like that? and that's an interesting idea, an idea of going, well, now that you're through the other side of it, um, to come out of the other side of a set of traumatic events and look back on it and go, am I still the same guy? Am I a different guy? Because remember that thing about stepping in the river, you never step in the same river twice because you're different and the water's different. And that feels very much what hesitation marks is like. It's like stepping into the water again, going back to the well, but the water is different and you're different. And like any good art, as a listener, as a fan, we have a relationship with this work. We have a relationship with this art, and our relationship with art changes over time because we change over time and the world changes over time. The music and the art that is on the record and the CD never changes. It's just what changes is our view upon that. It's like if we're in a vehicle and you're driving past an enormous building, and no matter where you are, the building is still enormous, but you see different sides of it. You see different facets of it. You know, you see the north face and the left face and the right face and the south face, depending upon where you are. And that's where Nine Inch Nails albums kind of exist. It's all views upon the same set of events and the same set of emotional ideas and temperature. And that's where I felt that this wasn't a great record. Because there's a number of themes that run through the album lyrically. The themes are of chaos and order, the themes of control and surrender, are kind of like a way of trying to find an equilibrium of living with trauma, of going to peace, and having a good working relationship with traumatic events. Having a degree of self-imposed coping mechanisms, kind of surviving a set of traumatic events and looking back at it in the rearview mirror, processing it, understanding it, as I think Baudelaire said, but I could be wrong. You know, life can only be lived forwards, but only understood backwards. You can only understand it when you look in the rearview mirror. And Hesitation Marks feels very much like it's a project of regression and reclamation. It feels very much like it's an album that's geared towards a historical perspective upon traumatic events that happened in the past, viewed at the distance of some remove. So obviously the most obvious kind of reflection of that is the title of a song called Came Back Haunted. Nine Inch Nails have come back with this album, and they have come back haunted by the memory of what was previously there, like the smell of burnt toast in a kitchen or just pictures in a book from The Shining. It's kind of coming to terms with the history of what has happened. So, you know, some of the song titles clearly kind of also indicate the degree of historical perspective upon previous events. There's a song called Various Methods of Escape, and there's one called Whilst I'm Still Here, or While I'm Still Here, which is very clearly around kind of looking back and looking at a set of events and giving it a historical perspective that you might not otherwise have had. It's a good album, not an amazing album. It certainly deserves the Nine Inch Nails title. It stands up as better than some of the previous Nine Inch Nails albums. Put bluntly, beats the shit out of With Teeth, and is really solid in that respect. Perhaps not as good as The Fragile, not as good as Pretty Hate Machine. Different type of relationship between this and there is Downward Spiral. Lots of people go, Downward Spiral, best Nine Inch Nails album ever. It isn't. It's really bloody good, but it's not the best one. And Hesitation Marks is kind of... So Downward Spiral, as a concept album, kind of how it goes all the way through, including the narrator committing effectively suicide during the title track. Hesitation Marks takes its title from almost looking back upon an event. So Hesitation Marks are, if you kind of like a slang word to describe effectively scars caused by self-harm and suicide attempts. They're hesitation marks. They're the marks of the moment where you decided that you were going to try and end your life in a violent fashion and you decided not to, which is very, very common actually. I think about 30% of the people that jump off bridges, when they find the bodies of people that have drowned, they find that what they've tried to do is they've tried to survive. They've made the decision that they want to live after they've jumped off. So they have moments of, strained muscles, broken bones, because what they've tried to do is try to put themselves in a position where they land in the water in a way that they'll survive it without realizing that the impact alone going at that speed, and by the way, when humans jump off a tall building, they speed up to the point where by about the time you're about 144 feet off the top, you are at the fastest speed that you can go. And that fast speed is it's like 150, 200 miles an hour. Even if the fall wasn't going to kill you, the impact of going into a body of water or the impact of hitting the ground would do so. But that doesn't mean that the body doesn't tense up or relax in a way to try and survive it. Hesitation marks is a word or a phrase used to describe, for example, the marks of failed suicide attempts or the marks of self-harming scars. And it's kind of like the scars of not going through with a suicide attempt or not succeeding at a suicide attempt. And I didn't know I was going to necessarily talk about this. A friend of mine who I hadn't seen for a number of years, who I had been intimate with, died by suicide last month. And that really shook me. And there's nothing I can say about that. There's nothing I can do about that. It just really makes me sad that somebody who I liked and had a good relationship with and who I rated and thought highly of and wanted the best for wasn't able to see a path through the problems or the issues that they were facing. And suicide is always a temporary, or more correctly, it's a permanent solution to a temporary set of problems. Everything will pass, and nothing lasts forever, not even nothing itself. And so we have that sense of that person was battling with and fighting with their particular ghosts and demons, and sometimes they win the battle, and that's what happened. And it makes me really sad that I'm not going to be able to bump into them again and see what they're going to be like as an old person, and think about, oh, I hope they're doing well, or oh, I really hope everything's going brilliantly for them. I live a long way away from where I grew up. I grew up in Birmingham in England, so I don't live in Birmingham in England. I live down south now, and that was a necessary step that I had to take at the time to make a break with a set of traumatic circumstances I was experiencing. And one of the things about, so for example, when people want to cure drug addictions or alcoholism or something, sometimes they will move out of their area and their home to somewhere completely different to make a break, so they don't even know who can I call if I want to score. I don't know. Who would I talk to if I wanted to get drugs? I don't know. What I had to do was almost like a romantic version of that, was to make a break with my history, which had turned poisonous for me. And so everywhere that I saw when I was in Birmingham reminded me of everything that had gone wrong. As Tony Hancock said in his suicide note, things just went wrong too many times. And Hesitation Marks as an album title is perfect in describing, I think, the philosophy of the record, which is around that sense of survival. The way out is through. What happens on the other side of that set of events? Now that you've found that you haven't been successful, that you've not gone through with perhaps your original plan, or you've tried and you've failed. Effectively, the downward spiral as an album is kind of like around going into a black hole to right at the bottom. Hesitation Marks is kind of the sound of coming through the other side of that, and looking back upon what you've experienced and kind of going, wow, that was fucking heavy, wasn't it? And that's why I think perhaps the song title "Come Back Haunted" is a really important part of the record's philosophy and its presentation. So we're going to go a little bit technical for a little bit of period of time. We're going to go into the record and talk through the individual songs. The first thing I should point out is that there are 2 different editions of the album. In fact, there's 3, but I've only got 2 because so there's the CD version and there's the vinyl edition. These are 2 different masterings of the albums. So this version here on vinyl is an audiophile edition that's presented in a way is designed for people that do very close listening to records and very close listening to music, and obviously also defined by the physical limitations of the vinyl medium. There's only so much you can put into a vinyl record before the grooves of the record actually can no longer contain the needle. The second one is the CD edition of the album. Here is the expanded deluxe version of the CD version of the album. This has a different mastering. It's mastered for CD and for iTunes. It's harsher, it's louder, it's got more dynamic range in it, but it's got more compression at the same time. Although the mixing, producing, and finishing of each song was done individually rather than finished on block, the mastering for each one of these is different. So effectively, these are two versions of identical content. So each song, by the way, was recorded as a separate entity at a separate time, song by song, piece by piece. So each one of the 14 songs that's on the album, the band worked on separately, finished, completed, and then when they had all 14 of those ready, they put together the album. So they weren't chopping and changing between tracks. They weren't picking up, say, various methods of escape, working on it in the morning, and then picking up running in the afternoon. That's not how it worked at all. They worked on various methods of escape, finished that, then they did the next song. Then they did the next song. So each song was the focus of a short period of obsession and compulsion at the time. What that creates is a slightly different sense to perhaps some albums. It doesn't feel necessarily that it's fully what's the word I'm thinking of here? It doesn't feel necessarily as coherent as some of the other albums, because actually the last moment is the last moment that was mixed with the last song, as opposed to going, well, actually we've finished most of the songs, we're just going to go back and do a couple of overdubs or something like that. And so we have slightly different masterings. We're going to go song by song now. I'm going to go quite quick through this. I've talked about the album as a whole. So it opens with side one, track one is The Eater of Dreams. Not played live, primarily because it doesn't need to be played live. The Eater of Dreams is a single kind of instrumental, ambient, scary intro. And this is the album, the 2013 original edition in black polyvinyl vinyl sleeves. I think it's been repressed since then, and this features yeah, okay, hang on a minute, let me work out which way this works. That's how it works. So, and it comes in an inner sleeve, which is effectively a specially created piece of unique artwork. All of this artwork, by the way, was presented in a book called Cargo in the Blood that was published in 2015. It was many squids. I think it was about £300, and it was very limited and sold out very, very quickly. So we have The Eater of Dreams, which is the opening song, and it's one of those short, vaguely threatening, ambient-ish, scary instrumental tracks that Nine Inch Nails are very, very good at. The first song of any note on it is Copy of A. Now there's an instrumental version of Copy of A, or Copy of A, which is called Taxi Driver, which was on a promotional CD. There is, I think there's a remix of Copy of That on the download only remix EP. Yeah, it is, and that's by Simeon Disco. So there's a number of releases that sit alongside the album that I will address as we go along. Copy of That is in my opinion one of the best Nine Inch Nails songs, certainly recently, very possibly ever. It's really reminds me, and the staging of it live really reminds me of Talking Heads' Stop Making Sense. It's a presentation of effectively a blank stage, and there's a brilliant intro that Trent does to it, I think in Korea, where he comes on stage and it's just him and a microphone and like one keyboard, and he was like having a good time, ready to party. Sorry guys, wrong band. And then started Copy of A, and then Copy of A is a song that to me is probably one of the best opening tracks of all time, actually, because it builds and builds and builds, and it adds each layer over the course of the song. Very similar, by the way, to Talking Heads' Stop Making Sense album, where you have individual members that kind of join song by song or partway through a song, and then all of a sudden, suddenly you're looking at the whole of the Talking Heads live band. So it starts off with Trent and a synth, then there's an additional keyboard player, then there's some bass, then there's some live drums, and then there's some guitar, and it just adds and builds and builds and builds. And one of the things about Nine Inch Nails that never really gets talked about is layering. Trent is incredible at layering a track. He's incredible at putting together and adding new elements and new parts over time to make the song as strong as it could be. And each one of those layers is added at precisely the right moment to maximize the re-listening value of that particular song. You can tell when you listen to a Nine Inch Nails song, there's one Nine Inch Nails song that is not good, And that's a first take, which went out on a compilation album or a various artist album where Nine Inch Nails were a guest in their verses, kind of nonsense. But there is a layering that you can tell someone's really thought about it. I mean, I've got all of these bits of music. What is the way that has a logical progression to adding each one of these pieces at the relevant points in the song to make sure the song remains fresh and has a sense of discovery, even though you've heard it 100 times? And there are things that happen in Copy of Our which I listen to and I kind of go, wow, that's really brilliant production. Lyrically, by the way, fantastic song, because it's about him kind of effectively taking a step back and questioning parts of his decision-making process. So, am I my authentic self? Am I asking the right questions? What are the motives that are driving me to behave in certain ways? How am I thinking? How am I feeling? Am I a genuine and authentic person, or am I a copy of a copy of a copy? So, the lyric is, everything I say has come before, assembled into something, and I don't know for certain anymore. I'm just a shadow, always trying to catch up with myself. I'm just an echo listening to someone's cry for help. And it's quite a cynical song in so much as you could listen to that lyric and you can kind of go, you're admitting right from the off that you're not sincere in some of this, that you're revisiting old lyrical obsessions and compulsions, you're revisiting old thoughts and feelings that you've got, and you're looking at them through the prism of time. And how much of that is real and how much of that is impressions and how much of that is influence from other people, it is open to debate on the track. And on the LP version of it, by the way, we have Trent vocals, electronics, percussion, guitar, live drums by Ilian Rubin from the Nine Inch Nails live band, bass by Pino Palladino, who's played bass with pretty much everybody apart from me, and then Lindsey Buckingham on guitar. Lindsey also plays on in 2 as well, track 12 of the album. And it's just got the idea of the chorus is, look what you had to start, while the change of heart you need to play your part. Now look what you've gone and done. That doesn't sound fun. See, I'm not the only one, a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. And it's a great song. I really wish it was played live more often. But I've not seen Nine Inch Nails play it live because I said goodbye on the Wave Goodbye show at the O2 in 2009, and I haven't changed my mind. I said goodbye to Nine Inch Nails at that show, and if they've changed their mind and said they want to come back, I'm not necessarily going to be part of that particular game. So track 3 is Came Back Haunted, the first single that was released from the album. Now, Came Back Haunted is a little cynical. Firstly, it's a song that very, very clearly kind of lyrically addresses the idea of, well, I couldn't quite solve the problems I had before, so I've come back and I'm going to try and revisit them again. But also, it is with Trent Ilian again on live drums and Alessandro Cortini on additional synthesizers, Alessandro being part of the Nine Inch Nails live band. But also it uses the same synths as Pretty Hate Machine. So if you think, oh, that sounds like Pretty Hate Machine, that's because Trent's using exactly the same synths, or at least most of them, or emulators of them. So it's a self-consciously backwards retrograde step. Track 4 is Find My Way, and there's a remix version of Find My Way on the CD, the second CD that comes with the bonus deluxe edition of the album. So the bonus deluxe edition of the album is this hardback book edition here, has a second CD with 3 remixes on. And Find My Way has, again, Trent on there, and Adrian Belew, who formerly of the David Bowie band, but also played on Further Down the Spiral and some of the other Nine Inch Nails material on guitar. It is a really interesting song, Find My Way, for 2 reasons. It has a coda at the end, which is, I have been to every place, I have been to everywhere, I am just trying to find my way, oh Lord, hear my prayer. Now, it's very similar to the ending of I Do Not Want This from the Downward Spiral. I want to go everywhere, I want to see everything, I want to do something that matters. It's the same kind of lyrical conceptions and ideas that you've got there. So revisiting it and revisiting some of the themes that are in Copy of Our as well, which is going, how original is this? actually. There's a really interesting rhythmic approach to Find My Way. The beat is a little bit off center. There's a bit of an echo that's in there. There's a bit of a hip hop feel to where it sits in placement of the vocals. So it's something that Night Shells haven't really done before. It's really interesting. And parts of it you can kind of go, well, that takes its cue from the soundtrack albums as well. Track 5 is All Time Low, which is for some reason has a chord progression that's very similar to ABBA's Name of the Game. Wasn't quite expecting it to go there. And again, the lineup is Adrian Belew, Pino Palladino on bass, again not playing with me, and Trent on everything else. There's a remix of All Time Low on the second CD with a hardback deluxe edition of the album. Hello, I'm the second hardback edition. There. Track 6 is Disappointed, which is one of the perhaps the most obvious of the singles as well. Yeah, but you know, we're dealing in an age where there aren't really singles. The idea of a single is, well, you release some stuff for download and for streaming that's a remix. You know, the idea of getting a CD single or a 12-inch single is just done and dusted. It's the physical product doesn't exist in the way in which it used to exist. So it makes these NOTCASTs, because I can't go, oh, here's the 12-inch of Disappointed, because there's never going to be a 12-inch of Disappointed. Although I think it is the law that everyone has to do a song called Disappointed at some point. We've got Morrissey, we've got Public Image Limited, Electronic, Nine Inch Nails. I'm pretty surprised that there isn't a... Well, I mean, there's kind of a Pet Shop Boys song called Disappointed because Neil Tennant sings the vocals on it. But every other band surely has a song called Disappointed. And if they don't, they have a think about what it is. This is a good song, strong, solid, very melodic, very catchy. Again, it's Trent on Near Enough Everything with Eugene Groster on additional weird bleeps and bloops. We have Everything, which is track 7. Now, Everything was the first song that was recorded and written for this album. The original idea was that there would be a greatest hits of Nin released in 2013 as a contractual obligation. And so Trent started recording, and the first track he recorded was Everything, which is atypical in so much as, again, it goes to some slightly new places. It has a different rhythmical approach. It feels much more guttural and much more what's the words I'm thinking of here? Much more visceral than some of the Nine Inch Nails stuff, because it's really built around a guitar riff. And it's got Adrian Belew on backing vocals and electronics, Trent on everything else, and Daniel Rowland, whoever he is, on additional bits and bleeps and bloops. There's an Autolux remix of Everything, which is on the Japanese CD of Hesitation Marks. I don't have that. And everything started actually with a drum machine as a track. So it started with the drum pattern and then kind of limited the song going, right, so actually, and this is a really interesting approach when it comes to writing, is when you take things away, you have to use the existing tools that you've got in a slightly different way. So the drum machine was the defining factor in Everything as opposed to anything else, and the song was built from the drum machine up, and the other elements were added over time. So you limit your palette, because sometimes, especially if you're a guitarist or a keyboard player, it's very easy to go, well, I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to write some riffs, and then I'm going to pick the best one of those riffs, and that's going to be the song. I'm going to have another riff that goes into that. And I actually go, well, actually, if you instead of playing the song and always writing with the riff on the guitar, what happens if you start with the rhythm track? What happens if you start with the vocals? What's the approach going to be? Is it going to be different? Is it going to be better? Is it going to be worse? Sometimes those experiments bear fruit. And one of those experiments was, of course, Everything, which, by the way, wasn't played live until 2022. I think it first played live in Glasgow. The idea being that effectively it's kind of like a statement of defiance, because the lyric to Everything is, I survived everything, I have tried everything and anything. And also kind of brings in later on the second line about wave goodbye, wish me well. And wave goodbye being a lyric that's used in Now I Am Nothing, and the title of the 2009 tour. So it's the most obviously retrospective of the songs that's on the album. So Yeah, there you go. Right, so track 8 is Satellite, and I think, let me just quickly check. Yes, that puts us through onto disc 2 of the vinyl edition of the LP. Satellite has a hot chip remix on the Download Remix EP. I'm not quite sure why there are Download Remix EPs, not actual EPs, but there we are. And we have, that's the inner sleeve for vinyl disc number 2 of the LP. And by the way, I said to combine with the 2 different masterings, there are 2 different sets of artwork. So there's an LP set of artwork that's designed in a very similar fashion to the Downward Spiral, around the physical construction of items and putting them into places. And then there's the CD artwork that very clearly is by the same artist at the same time, using the same materials, but it is taken from a slightly different perspective. This, for example, could be a photograph of the back of this. I'm not quite sure. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know, and I haven't bothered to look it up. But Satellite is track 8, side 3, track 1, and it is almost, it's reminiscent to The Fragile, in so much as it's got the ending of Satellite is kind of similar to some of the songs on The Fragile. There's like a layering of ambient sounds as the song kind of evaporates into nothingness. Kind of like if you're staring at the edges of a cloud and it's really difficult to see what the edges of the cloud are. That's what Satellite does. And then we have various methods of escape. Track 9. And I'm not quite sure actually, because Satellite kind of indicates that there's a lyric there around being not a submarine mission to escape you, baby, as per the Sex Pistols. But the lyric is, data trails like fingernails scratch across the sky. And Satellite, I'm watching you. I'm one step ahead. I'm part of you. I'm inside your head. The idea of being a satellite is something that's got a relationship to something else, and maybe it's smaller and it's lesser and it's connected to it. The moon is a satellite of the Earth. The Earth is a satellite of the sun. My record collection is a satellite of me. I drag it around me like space dust, like the end of Galaxy Quest. Galaxy Quest is 24 years old. I haven't spoiled the film for you, by the way. But it's got that kind of era of sense of the shadow of history, not being able to escape the consequences of your past. Things that have happened in the past that are coming with you into the future, whether you like them or not. And then track 9 is various methods of escape, which again is Trent and Pino and Adrian Belew, which I must admit, I can't really remember anything about that track. I probably should have re-listened to the album today, but I decided against it because my decision-making process when it comes to making one of these is I'm going to sit around and I'm going to think about it and go, oh, I should probably do one. And then sometimes I go, I've got to think about that record. Whereas other days I'm kind of like, no, like say today, I didn't know until about 20 minutes before I started that today was going to be my hesitation marks one. I had lots of things that were going in my mind. I'm going to talk about Flaming Lips. I'm going to talk about Pink Floyd. Am I going to talk about the Smiths? Am I going to talk about Nine Inch Nails? Yes, the 9 Inch Nails. Woo, they're good. I was going to talk about them and take that forward and see kind of where we go. So various methods of escape is again, it's a song I don't really remember, but what we do have is we have next after that is Running. Running is quite a popular song title. There's a Cold Cave remix of Running on the remix EP that's download only. And we have a really interesting idea of, again, following on from the lyric from Satellite, is around escaping the shadow of history, around what are you running from? And the chorus is, I'm running out of places I can hide from this. I'm running out of ways to keep hiding this. I'm running out of ways to I hope I'll never get away. Now the lyric, by the way, or more correctly, the picture in the CD booklet there is of what is clearly a woman, what appears to be possibly illuminated by headlights, standing in front of a wall. It's a little bit dark. It's a little bit scary. It's a little bit weird. And then we've got track 11, which is I Would For You, taking its name, by the way, from the Jane's Addiction song of the same name. I love Jane's Addiction. Maybe I should talk about Jane's Addiction at some point. Maybe. Who knows? Depends. And I Would For You, by the way, features Trent and Eugene Gorster, as well as Adrian Belew and Joshua Eustace, Joshua being part of the live band in 2013, and Ilian Rubin on live drums. So we have three songs next. Into, which again features a reappearance by Lindsey Buckingham on guitar, Adrian Belew on guitar, and Trent on most everything. And then Whilst I'm Still Here, a song about, to me, Whilst I'm Still Here feels like it's a song around the survivors. So think about when I'm talking earlier about hesitation marks and the concept of history kind of following somebody around and being inescapable. The idea for Whilst I'm Still Here is saying effectively, and this is the only thing I've ever done, ticking time is running out, the closest I've ever come. And yesterday I find out the world was ending. Stay with me, hold me near, whilst I'm still here. Great lyric, actually. And I wrote a very similar lyric recently, although perhaps slightly more carnal. The concept being around, well, if the world is ending, I want to spend it with you. And whilst I'm still here is kind of going, well, whilst the world is ending, whilst we're facing the consequences of our actions and everything that goes with it, that is pretty much, the end of it. The lyrics for While I'm Still Here, by the way, do borrow a little bit from Hank Williams' Weary Blues from Waiting, and also the idea of going, well, we've spent so long waiting for this that when it actually arrives, are we actually going to appreciate it? Are we going to realise that's what it is? And sometimes if there's something that you've been waiting for years or weeks, and there's been a couple of things which have happened recently where I've actually waited, 4 or 5 years to experience those things. And at the moment it's actually happening, I kind of go, this is it. This is the moment. This is a thing that I've thought about on a very regular basis for 4 years, 5 years, pre-COVID in some cases. And kind of gone, right, so that's it. Okay. Disappointed, I guess, as the lyric might have it. There's something that's quite hopeful about the fact that the last lyric on the most recent Nine Inch Nails album proper until recently is, remember when we always were, yes, even then, stay with me, hold me near, whilst I'm still here. That's far more hopeful than some of the other lyrics that we've got. And then the last track on the album, track 14, is Black Noise. Black Noise is a moody instrumental that effectively acts almost as a sort of coda to the rest of the album, picks up some of the themes from it, and then kind of dissipates into kind of like a nothingness. The more I think about it, the more I think that actually this is a really good album. There's certainly no quality gap in it. There's nothing about it when I listen to it and I kind of go, it shouldn't have been an album. I listen to it and I kind of go, this is a really great, interesting, good album. It's worthy of the Nine Inch Nails name. It stands up and next to all the other Nine Inch Nails albums. It's very, very good. What I do feel, and this is me, I'm sounding more cynical than I actually am, is my relationship to the core themes that are constantly addressed through Nine Inch Nails has changed. I am less focused on the things that perhaps when the first Nine Inch Nails album came out, and I was 18 or 17 actually, I think when it came out, and at that point in time, I was sat there going, I am obsessed with who am I, what am I going to be, where am I going to live, who am I going to love, am I going to love, is anything going to happen? All of the things which that album was obsessed with and focused on are things that I had answers to over time, and things that I was able to, through my own actions, solve and resolve, and to be able to put myself into a position where I knew which direction I was going to be travelling in. That's why perhaps Hesitation Marks isn't an album that is as strongly ingrained into my DNA as some of the other ones. Now, as I've mentioned before, we have the special edition of the album, the deluxe edition of the album here, which has a second CD. And just so that you know, the second CD is only 3 songs long, and that is remixes of Find My Way, All Time Low, and While I'm Here. It's a pretty disappointing deluxe edition, especially considering there was a 4-track remix EP that was issued around about the same time, with remixes of Satellite and Running and some of the other tracks that are on the album, as well as the Auto Lux mix of everything that's on the Japanese CD. There was a demos EP that was released as part of a download package, so you were able to get some demo versions. And then there was also a live 2013 EP. I understand why live 2013 wasn't issued at the same time, because the performances hadn't happened. But I also, at the same point, I kind of wondered why there hadn't been like a CD EP or something that was live 2013. That was 9 Inch Nails' Hesitation Marks, which to me at least is a very good record. But as I said, my relationship to 9 Inch Nails has changed over time. My relationship is not as intense as it once was, and so to me, perhaps, Hesitation Marks and the existence of Hesitation Marks is something that feels to me to be a little less essential in my understanding of 9 Inch Nails than some of the other releases have been. And that's, it's a bit of a shame, but to be honest, have 9 Inch Nails changed, or have I changed? And well, I've changed, and that means that my relationship to 9 Inch Nails has changed. And I've gone in one direction, and me and the band have kind of grown apart, and I'm sure Trent is crying into his mansion about that. I still buy the records, I still enjoy the records, I just don't live the records, I think, the way that I used to do, because the central themes that exist inside Hesitation, these themes of order and control and chaos and surrender, and trying to find an equilibrium of living with a form of life that's going to work for you, almost like a design for living. And these themes are themes that run all through the record like a stick of rock. And these are themes which, in the 24 or so years between 1989 and 2013, when this record came out, I have had my own battles around putting an order and a control and a structure around my life, around solving issues like, well, where am I going to live? Who am I going to live with? Am I going to love? What's my future going to look like? I've been able to find answers to that, which this record is still grappling with. And I'm kind of sat there going, if you can't find the answers to those questions after a quarter of a century and lots of money, you're never going to find them. But then that's part of the eternal battle, isn't it? Is that you're not given a manual when you come out about how to be a human or what to be. You have to find out as you go along, and I guess that's part of the journey. But for me, my part of the journey is I've got a really good idea around who I am and what I'm going to do and how I'm going to behave and where I'm going to live and what I'm going to do in my life and all of that type of stuff, which means that the questions which are being asked in Hesitation Marks are questions I already have the answer to. But it's a very, very good 9 Inch Nails album. Really, really like it. Really, really rate it very, very highly. And that is where I'm going to end this particular episode, because the next one is going to be around Gone Girl and Not the Actual Events, Ad Violence, Bad Witch, the Vietnam War, and a whole bunch of other things. So I'm going to wrap up here. Take care of yourselves and each other. Stay beautiful. Like and subscribe, and I will see you soon for the next episode where I come back haunted. There, see? How naff was that? Well, I'm a dad. I've got to make dad jokes. I don't make the rules. Those are the rules. So see you soon. Stay lovely and all that. And ciao. No, not ciao. Ciao is very Italian. So as Iggy Pop would say, good the fuck night. Look after yourselves, and I'll see you soon. Bye.